to peace. The storm surrounding me, let it break. At your name, still call the sea to still, the rage in me to still every wave. At your name, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
Breathe, call these bones to live, call these lungs to sing once again. I will praise Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You silence fear. Jesus, Jesus. You make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
And your name is a light the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Your name is a life forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome. Yeah. Your name is a light that the shadows can't deny. Your name cannot be overcome. Yeah. Your name is a light forever lifted high. Your name cannot be overcome.
Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus, you silence fear. Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus.
I've carried a burden too long on my own. I wasn't created to bear it alone. I hear your invitation to let it all go. Yeah, I see it now. I'm laying it down, and I know that I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again. Oh, oh, oh. You saw my condition, had a plan from the start. Your Son for redemption, the price for my heart. I
don't have a context for this kind of love. Don't understand, I can't comprehend. All I know is I need you. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart needs a surgeon, my soul needs a friend. So I run to the Father again and again and again and again. Whoa, whoa, again and again and again and again. Whoa, 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 and again and again.
Heart has been in your sight long before my first breath, running into your arms, running to life from death. I feel this rush deep in my chest. Your mercy is calling out. As I am, pull me in, and I know I need you now. I run to the Father, I fall into grace. I'm done with the hiding, no reason to wait. My heart found a surgeon, my soul found a friend. So I'll run to the Father again and again and again and again.
Caught up in your presence, I just wanna sit here at your feet. Caught up in this holy moment, I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you. I'm sorry when I've just gone through the motions. I'm sorry when I just sang another song. So take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. And I'm sorry when I've come with my agenda. I'm sorry when I forgot that you're enough. So take me back to where we started. I open up my heart to you. I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, just want you. Nothing else, nothing else, nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else, nothing else, Jesus, nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else, nothing else, Jesus, nothing else will do. I just want you. Nothing else, nothing else, Jesus, nothing else will do. I'm caught up in your presence. I just wanna sit here at your feet. I'm caught up in this holy moment. I never wanna leave. Oh, I'm not here for blessings. Jesus, you don't owe me anything more than anything that you can do. I just want you.
Good evening, I'm Colleen, and I'm here to talk to you tonight about my story of domestic violence. I'm both a victim and a survivor of domestic violence. There are many people who don't like to use the word victim when we discuss people who have been through domestic violence and are on the other side of it, but the truth is, I am both a victim and a survivor. Those are two sides of my story, and they're equally important. In a 2013 TED Talk entitled The Danger of a Single Story, author Chimamanda Adichie proposed that we should not approach a single group of people, a nation, a country, an ethnicity, with a single story in mind about who they are. And I think this is true for domestic violence too. Often we think of domestic violence as a single story, a story of a woman, a story of a person who's bruised and beaten, a story of a person who's pitiful and sad, a story of a person who is going in and out and back and forth in this relationship because she loves and wants to be loved by this abuser. And that is not everyone's story. And physical violence is not the only form of domestic violence that exists. That is not my story. My story looks much different than that. The truth is that I was married for 21 years in a relationship with my ex-husband for 21 years. We had 5 children who are living and 1 child who passed away when he was 4 months old. And I never had anyone leave me bruised or marked or put me in the hospital or any of those things that you hear when you think about domestic violence. Instead, I was a victim of verbal abuse, emotional abuse, spiritual abuse, sexual abuse, and many other forms of abuse. It's hard to describe what that looks like in a relationship. It's hard to articulate exactly what it meant to me to be a victim of those forms of abuse. But I'm going to try to share this with you tonight so that you can understand better what one person's story of domestic violence can look like. From early on in our relationship, I knew that something was off kilter, but I ignored it because I wanted so badly to be the perfect wife and the perfect mother and to have the perfect marriage. There were times of constant rage in my marriage. From the very beginning, he would lose it very easily. There were points in our marriage where there were no pots and pans that would lay flat on our stove from being banged and thrown to the floor so often. There were dinners thrown at the wall, and just a constant rage that I was expected to deal with and to mitigate for him, that it was my responsibility. And if I couldn't fix it, it became my fault. And that was the major form of abuse that took place in my marriage. The other situation that took place in my marriage was that every negative emotion that he had, I was supposed to be able to come up with a solution for, fix. And if I could not, then it was somehow my fault and I needed to do something differently. If I could not, then it became a matter of the fact that I was not a good enough wife. I was not submissive enough. I was not holy enough. I was too opinionated. I was too strong-minded. I was not letting him be the leader and the head of our household. Now, a lot of you may come from Christian backgrounds and know, have heard the scriptural references that pertains to, but the truth is that's a form of abuse, and it's called spiritual abuse. To use religion to try to put someone in their place or to hold something over their head is a form of abuse, and that was the major form of abuse I experienced in my marriage, or a major form of abuse I experienced in my marriage. Another situations that happened were isolation from relationships. You know, people ask all the time, how did you not know? How did you not know that things were not okay? But the truth is that being in a Christian background and surrounded by Christian community, I had the notion that Christian women don't speak badly about their husbands, and that if I told anyone about the things that were happening in my marriage, that it would be gossiping negatively about my husband. And so often I didn't let anyone know, but people would get close enough and see that things were off kilter and try to bring it up with me, and I would get a little empowered. I would try to talk to him about it, and he would sabotage those relationships by either cutting me off from those people or moving our family to a different place. We lived in the 21 years we were married, we lived in 5 countries because we served as missionaries in 21 towns in 30 houses. There was no stability for us. He never held a job for longer than 6 months at a time. And all of that chaos, constant chaos, contributed to the constant rage, the constant emotional upheaval that then became my responsibility to fix. For instance, we had I had a dear friend who had been also who was a survivor of domestic violence, and who came to visit us in Mission at one point and saw what was going on. She was with us for 4 days and was able to see the screaming, the yelling, the throwing things, the needing me constantly by his side to fix everything that went wrong, and brought up to me the fact that she was concerned about the relationship. And she and I became very close, and she became a big support to me. And I tried, with her help, to address some of the things that were happening in our relationship. Eventually, one evening, my ex-husband came home and told me that this friend's husband had asked him to tell me that I needed to stay away from her, that I was causing her to drink when she was a recovering alcoholic, and that he needed me not to be around her anymore. I did not find out until many, many years later that that was a lie and that had never occurred. But he did whatever he could to isolate me from those relationships. That empowered me and that enabled me to see that things were not okay in our relationship. There were incidences of him hammering a hole through our kitchen table, him throwing a ball at my windshield as I drove down the driveway to leave our home. And that constant rage is something that causes you to live in constant fear. I did not really realize until they were much older and could articulate it to themselves after our divorce that even my children lived in fear of this constant rage and unpredictability. When you don't know what person you're going to get, it's very difficult to live peacefully. And for those 21 years, I lacked peace. It was hard to know exactly how to address it and how to work through it. I thought that it was my responsibility to try to fix it. And also, I was raising young children, homeschooling young children. We became missionaries. We were living in other countries. I had no support systems. I was all on my own. And so I had no perspective on how bad things were. And I had no one to help me get out. And I don't know that I would have wanted to get out early on if anybody had been able to tell me. I think that I would have thought, because of my Christian background again, I thought divorce was wrong. And I thought that leaving made me a failure. That it was my responsibility to try to be, if I could be a better wife, that was what I always told myself. If I could just be a better wife, things would get better. He would get better. Obviously, I know now that that was not the truth. And that the lie, living in the lie of the fact that everything was my responsibility and that I needed to fix it, was part of the abuse. We spent 6 years in Costa Rica as missionaries in our last stint in the mission field. And that was the time in which things began to get really difficult for me. I was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder from the loss of our son. And it was untreated at the time. And we were involved in a very emotionally and physically exhausting ministry that I had begun to pregnant Indigenous women who lived in our home with us. And I was homeschooling our 5 children. And we were just pressed on every side. The constant stress of that triggered him often. There was constant screaming and yelling, constant waking me up in the middle of the night, wanting to talk about things, which is another form of abuse. There was constant just pouring out negative emotions and expecting me to be able to handle them for him. And the weight of all of that actually led to a point in which I attempted suicide. That was the point at which I realized that, well, not immediately, but in the months following that, I realized that even if I was the one who was wrong in this situation, even if it was all my fault, I didn't deserve to die for it. And I didn't want to die. So I began to look for help to get out. I began to tell him that I needed to go home from the mission field, that I needed time to heal. And his answer was always that if God wanted us to leave the mission field, he'd give us a place to live for free. That he just couldn't give up his vision of what our life was supposed to be to take care of me and my needs. I was ignored and left to battle and struggle on my own. And so finally a friend offered me the opportunity to come here to Fort Wayne and apply for a job. And I did. And I took the job on the spot. I went back and told him that the kids and I were going to move to Fort Wayne and he could do what he wanted. And what he decided to do was to split his time between the mission field and home. And so I began to have plenty of time and space away from him to realize some things about how bad it really was, and how I did okay when he wasn't around, and then I crashed back into mental illness when he was around. And I had many friends who were able to see that as well and support me in realizing that this was not okay and this was not how I needed to live. And so I asked him for a separation, an informal separation. He was going back to Costa Rica, and I asked him to take 3 months and leave me for 3 months to just work some things out and figure some things out. And in that time period, he began to call and text incessantly, contact our friends and tell them I was missing, so that they would get out on the run looking for me. And eventually, he hacked into my email, my Facebook, cyber stalked me, found out some private information that I was not sharing with him about a surgery that I had planned, and showed up back at home, ambushing me the night before the surgery. I went the next day and filed a protective order and was granted it. And in retaliation for me filing the protective order, he filed for divorce. We began the process of divorce. It was treacherous and terrible. He tried to take the kids from me, claimed that my mental illness was a danger to the kids, and threatened to take the kids and run if he didn't win the court battle. And it was a terrible, terrible time. But finally, 2 years ago, we made it to the other side of the divorce. And I stepped into my freedom. I stepped into the second half of my story where I could become a survivor and where I could thrive rather than just be surviving day to day. The kids and I now live a life of recovery. Obviously, there's a lot of recovering to do when you've been through that much trauma. But we are doing well and we are happy, even though it can be a struggle to be a single mom. On the worst days, it's not as bad as it was. And I can always remind myself of that. We are happy and content, and their dad actually is a part of their lives. I have learned how to set boundaries with him and learned how to deal with that relationship in a healthy manner, so that he doesn't have power and control anymore over me and over my emotions and over how I feel. And I don't have that obsession with having to try to fix things for him. And so we are able to co-parent the kids together as much as possible. He does not live nearby anymore. But we're able to communicate and work things out together for the sake of the kids. And we are all surviving and we are all thriving now. Even though domestic violence was a part of my story, and even though it was a long and difficult part of my story, it's not all of my story. And now that I'm on the other side of my story, I can look back at it and know that even though I was a victim in that part, I don't have to forever be defined by the term victim. I am a survivor now. And I'm grateful to be able to call myself a survivor. I hope that this helps you understand a little bit about domestic violence, about the way it can take place in people's lives, and that it doesn't always look like the story we tell ourselves, that there are lots of forms of abuse and there are lots of ways that it affects people, and there are lots of stories. Every story is different, but it's important for you to know how all these stories can look, because you may be sitting next to a person who is experiencing these unseen forms of violence, these forms of violence that don't leave bruises, that don't leave broken bones, that don't put people in the hospital. And it's important for you to have the eyes to see when something is off kilter, and to not be afraid to have the awkward conversation of saying, hey, I don't think things are right here. Are you okay in this relationship? If it wasn't for the people who did that for me over and over again and empowered me little by little, I don't know that I would be here today. And so I encourage you to realize that 1 in 4 women will be a victim of domestic violence. So someone in the room, in any room that you're in a classroom, in our virtual chapel tonight, is a victim. Someone sitting near you in a restaurant is a victim. Without a doubt, a friend or a family member that you love is a victim. And so it's important for you to realize that every story is different and every story looks different. But for you to have eyes to see and ears to hear in order to know how you can step in and help someone. I hope this helps you see a little bit, my story helps you see a little bit about the truth and the reality of domestic violence, and encourages you to be educated, be aware, and step in to help when you can. Thank you.